So I had a conversation recently with a young man who's been in deep contact with the think tank for the last several years, who made a movie which became the #1 movie on Netflix for a while. And he'd been in deep conversation with us, and it was about one of the themes we talked about yesterday. Right? And the theme was, stay close, the theme was existential risk, which we're going to talk about just a little bit tomorrow. And existential risk means risk to our existence. But I want to make a distinction. There's two forms. Now, when I use the word now existential risk, or what we're going to call tomorrow, and we've called in years before, and anyone who's here for the first time, we're going to completely take care of you. We're not going to use any words that we don't fully explain. We're not going to resort to shorthand, right? If there's anything that's not clear, right, ask, and just like some mad welcome. So whether you're here the first time or the 10th time doesn't matter. We're totally one breath, one community. Okay, so the word existential risk, right, risk to our existence, was coined by Nick Bostrom, but it's actually referring, right, to this notion that's very deep, right, this potential annihilation of the future, which we talked about yesterday, we talked about last year, I've been talking about it for the last decade. And it's before COVID, when I would basically say to people, it's not too big to fail, people looked at me and said, like, stick to unique self. I mean, stick to what you know, right? And I remember even that evening, I always remember, that beautiful building, with 𝗙𝗍𝗍𝗀𝘀, right? The building I always forget the name of, but that gorgeous building, right? What's the name of it? What's the name of that building that we were in at that evening? Right? Beautiful, right? And we were talking about existential risk, and the people were fantastic. But when we got to the unique self stuff, everyone woke up. But in the existential risk part, which I remember I spent at James's house days trying to write out, like locked in a room, right? Literally, I didn't come out, right? And I tried to, for the first time, say it out loud. And as I did it in that room, it was the first half of the talk. Remember, everyone's eyes glazed over, all right? And then everyone relaxed when we started talking about unique self. And I said, wow, people don't get it, right? It's like, and what we're saying is it's not too big to fail, right? It's right. Existential risk is about systemic collapse. And what I've been trying to do for the last decade is look at the systems and how they operate in their infrastructure, we said yesterday, in their social structure, and their superstructure, right? And we came to the conclusion that there's no question that the thing will collapse in and of itself. And then when COVID happened, all of a sudden the unimaginable happened. You couldn't fly. I mean, that simple idea, you couldn't take a flight someplace. You couldn't leave your house, right? People lost their jobs, families all over the world, right? Tens and tens of millions of people have lost their life savings, the future of their children, right? I mean, we think COVID's over, right? The upper middle class thinks COVID's over, which is our narcissism, right? COVID's not over. Right? Tens and tens and tens of millions of people in the world lost the entire world they dreamed of building for decades. Sometimes several generations took to get a family actually at even keel. That all got crushed and crashed. None of it's been repaired. Right? The side effects, the systemic side effects of COVID, right, have set human trafficking, right, sexual slavery, starvation back decades. Right? Because, of course, we didn't think in terms of systems, right? And we actually stopped all movement in the world, right? Focused in the short-term present, moved by the reptilian brain, you follow? In order to our immediate goal is let's stop the immediate short-term effect of COVID. We outlawed all approaches to COVID except for one officially sanctioned one. How that happened, let's not go there, right? And we ignored all of the peripheral effects and caused massive breakdowns in supply chains and massive starvation along the way. So how we should have dealt with it, right? Different conversation. But the point is, again, it's the freeze framing of the reptilian brain, right, that sees only what's in front of it and can't see the broader set of issues. But what we did realize in COVID is, I have to say, since COVID, when I say to people, it's not too big to fail, there's this flicker of recognition. Does everyone get what I mean? There's like, oh, okay. The systems are not invulnerable, right? And existential risk is based on systems collapse, right? When the river runs dry, right? When the desert's no longer there the way you thought it was, when the dead zones in the oceans, right? When you start, right, you add all up the 10 or 11 different factors, which are all on the breaking point. Climate change is the least of our problems of the 10. Of the 10 existential risks, climate change is number 10, just so you get it. Okay, so that's the existential risk, which is the potential death of humanity, which we can directly affect and change that vector. That's what this week's about, and that's what the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, which is our new upcoming name, right, is about. Isn't that a good name? Okay, so that's one. That's the death of, right, it's the death of humanity. But there's a second form of existential risk, which is not the death of humanity, right? It's the death of our humanity. Do you get that sentence? So there's two forms of existential risk. Stay close. One is the death of humanity, and the second is the death of our humanity. You get those are two different things.